Show.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening and welcome to Fox News Prime Time. I'm Rachel Campos-Duffy, and tonight we're going to start with a bombshell report with more lies from the Biden administration tonight as we're learning that the White House blocked private evacuation flights out of Afghanistan. Emails obtained by Fox News show the State Department, quote, refused to grant official approval for private evacuation flights from Afghanistan to land in third countries. Furthermore, the State Department explicitly stated that charter flights, even those containing American citizens, would not be allowed to land at Defense Department air bases. The State Department defended the decision, raising concerns of possible terrorists being on board while having no one on the ground to verify the flight manifests. But these actions go against Biden's promise that he wouldn't leave any Americans behind.
90% of Americans in Afghanistan who wanted to leave were able to leave. And for those remaining Americans, there is no deadline. We remain committed to get them out if they want to come out.
Well, that was clearly a lie, as the administration is now actively working to stop American citizens from escaping the failed nation. And we don't even know how many Americans are left stranded in Afghanistan.
We've been able to identify a relatively small number of Americans who we believe are seeking to depart from Mazar-e-Sharif with their families. We've been assured, again, that all American citizens and Afghan citizens with valid travel documents will be allowed to leave.
So what constitutes a relatively small number? And who's in charge of deciding what is a valid travel document?
We've also been engaging with the Taliban on this topic, including in recent hours. They've said that they will let people with travel documents freely depart, but they have said that those without valid documents at this point can't leave.
That's right. The Taliban. Once again, we're at the mercy of a terror group to ensure that Americans can return home safely. So how does Anthony Blinken still have a job after this colossal failure? Where is the accountability? Remember, Blinken was vacationing in the Hamptons, of all places, when Afghanistan collapsed. From there, he called President Ashraf Ghani and told him to step aside. And that's when all hell broke loose. The State Department's repeated failures has caused others to spring into action, including Oklahoma Representative and former cage fighter Markwayne Mullin. He wasn't going to sit by as Americans were left to be slaughtered in Afghanistan. After a friend pleaded for help in evacuating 4 Americans, Congressman Mullin rushed to do everything he could to help. He teamed up with a group of veterans, contractors, and the nonprofit Sentinel Foundation for the rescue effort. And yet the State Department continually stood in their way, first as they tried to leave through the Kabul airport, and then as Mullin's team tried to enter the country through Tajikistan. But in spite of the State Department's obstruction, their mission was a success, and they were able to get the 4 Americans out over land. And what was the State Department's response? To steal credit for the heroic efforts of others. Joining me now, Oklahoma Congressman Markwayne Mullin. Congressman,
hey,
this is an amazing story. I mean, it's just outrageous. How angry, how mad are you that after everything that you and that organization, that nonprofit went through, you have the State Department trying to take credit for it?
You know, I would like to say I was surprised, but I wasn't. Along the way, we had multiple ambassadors that we spoke to that had told us when we were trying to arrange what we call rat lines, because with these same people we tried to get out to Hakaya and we couldn't get the State Department to open the gate. We tried on the 28th, the 29th, and the 30th multiple times, and when they said that anybody that wanted to leave could leave, that's not true, because you had to go through 3 Taliban checkpoints, and each one of them would charge between $500 to $1,000 a person to cross those checkpoints. So that's why the other countries was going out and getting their citizens and bringing them back, but not the United States, but at the orders from either Secretary Blinken or President Biden. And so when we started trying to find other places to take them out of through other countries and set up rat lines, which we have been successful doing. We have right now 23 other U.S. citizens, AMSETs, in safe houses in different locations outside of Kabul that are waiting to get out too. when we started trying to find and work with embassies around there, they told us, they said, Mr. Mullen or Rep Mullen, we have been instructed not to assist you in any way. Now, this is embassies telling me that Washington, D.C. told them not to assist us in any way. And it's a bold-faced lie when they're out there saying that this was a successful evacuation, this was a successful mission, when, Rachel, the truth is, I wouldn't be there if it was successful, and other organizations wouldn't be there, and the Sentinel Foundation wouldn't be there if it was successful. And then when we worked for literally 48 almost around-the-clock hours trying to negotiate with the Taliban to release Miriam to be able to come across the bridge, and then Blinken puts out a statement that says that the Taliban was helpful and released them. I will tell you, at 3 o'clock yesterday morning, Central Standard Time, at 3 o'clock yesterday morning, they had threatened to kill her because I was on the phone with her, and they had threatened to kill her if she approached the checkpoint again.
Right.
And that doesn't sound like they're working with us.
No.
But Blinken, he goes out there and wants to take credit for it, and it infuriates me because they continue to lie to the American people.
I'm sure you've had some time to think about this entire ordeal, and you have to wonder, and I'm sure you have, and tell me what you think the answer is. Why would the State Department stand in the way of you helping when they didn't do it?
You know, my personal opinion is they're trying to squash this story. They want this bad news to go away as soon as possible. And I truly believe that their way to do that is just not allow it to be a story anymore.
Right.
And why else would they not allow American citizens? You know, a while ago you talked about the airplane sitting in Mazar Sharif, Mez, and the State Department not giving them clearance to land. Well, we've been working on several of those planes. In fact, Miriam was on one of those planes before we pulled her off. And what we had suggested to the State Department, I made this suggestion. I called them and said, why don't we let one plane leave that only has AMSETs, American citizens, and SIVs, which are special immigration visas that are granted to come to the U.S. Why don't we just fill up one plane and allow them to come in? And they said, well, no, we can't because we won't know who's on the manifest sheet. I said, I will give you the passports and all the documentations of the SIVs to show who's on there. And they still wouldn't grant us the opportunity to leave.
Right. On top of all of this, Congressman, the worst part, and maybe it's not the worst part, but it's one of the parts, is that the State Department and the administration is actually trying to smear you. They're accusing you of showboating, and you probably wouldn't have had to do this if they had done their job. Send in special forces, send in, the Navy SEALs, or better yet, gotten our Americans out before they closed and withdrew this from this operation or from this country.
Yeah, how about use the plan that President Trump had, where we were going to close the Kabul airport second to last and keep Bagram Airport until last. That way we can still have air support and have military personnel present to make sure this didn't happen. How about just use that plan and instead of blaming it on everybody? For me, I never wanted this to go public. We never went in there to try to go public. We wanted to be as quiet as possible. The Sentinel Foundation is non-political.
Yeah.
They don't want publicity like this. And so when we started teaming up with them, we made a decision not to go public with any of it. But the State Department leaked a conversation that was completely misinterpreted that I had with another ambassador when I asked them, who told you couldn't work with me? And they said, we can't. It came out of D.C. And I said, sir, either you tell me who told you, or you're going to hear from me in a different capacity, because we're going to have a hearing on this, and I'm going to find out eventually who told you not to work with us to get American citizens out. And he apologized profusely. It wasn't his fault. He was following orders from the State Department in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Congressman, we really appreciate it. It took an MMA fighter and a congressman to help this operation get through. We're grateful, and I'm sure that family is too.
Rachel,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to make it clear. I was a low man on this totem pole. I worked with great operators on the Sentinel Foundation. That these are Tier 1 individuals and Special Forces guys. That I was the least of them all, and I was just blessed to be able to work with them.
Well, we're blessed to have you and that team. Thank you so much, Congressman.
Thank you, Rachel.
All right. As the failures of the Biden administration pile up, people are left to ask, where's the accountability? So far, the only person to lose their job for Afghanistan is a colonel asking the same question.
People are upset because their senior leaders let them down, and none of them are raising their hands and accepting accountability or saying, we messed this up. Did any of you throw your rank on the table and say, hey, it's a bad idea to evacuate Bagram Airfield, the strategic air base, before we evacuate everyone? Did anyone do that? And when you didn't think to do that, did anyone raise their hand and say, we completely messed this up?
So how do Tony Blinken and Lloyd Austin still have their jobs? Let's ask Katie McFarland, former Deputy National Security Advisor and author of Revolution. Welcome, Katie. So let's answer the question. How do they still have their jobs? Why has no one in the leadership of the DOD and also in the administration, no one, not one head has rolled?
Now, it's even worse than that. I mean, not only are they so dishonorable that they're not resigning in shame, but what's happened for years is American diplomats, political leaders, and particularly those three-star generals, they trotted up to Capitol Hill and they said, oh, you know, we just need a few billion more dollars. We just need a couple thousand more American troops. Hey, how about another year or two and we're going to win this war? They knew that it was losing all the way along. And what did they do? When they got to their high rank, they retired. They took off their uniforms and they went to work for defense contractors. It is a corrupt system and it's kept us in a losing war. And now, when the Biden administration has I think, been almost criminally incompetent, nobody's going to be held accountable.
Right.
And the reason why, they think they're going to get away with it. They think they're going to get away with it because there's no media left in Afghanistan. So they think, well, the press will move on. Now we're going to have another story about, you know, the hurricane or maybe, you know, the environment or maybe we'll talk about unemployment. They think they're going to get away with it. The problem is, the next time this happens, when China tests the United States or Russia tests the United States, they won't get away with it.
Yeah, you know, I agree with you, Katie. I think they can get away with it. They think this is just another news cycle. But the problem is that we're up on the 20th anniversary of 9/11 this coming weekend. We'll be commemorating that on Fox and Friends weekend as well. And people's attention is on this. We have 13 soldiers who died. And across this country, bars and restaurants are honoring them, putting places for them. The American people are not moving on from this. I just don't know, Katie. Maybe this time they won't get away with it in terms of the media.
Now, the media is going to let them get away with it. But when you have people like the congressman who you just spoke to in a really moving interview,
right? What's
happened is Americans have stepped up. The government's in the way. The government isn't saving Americans. The government left Americans behind. It's individuals. Individual Americans are saying, okay, my government isn't going to do it. I'm going to go help the people I know need help. And God bless them. You know, it really gives you faith, I think, in the American people. Not the American government, but the American people.
Absolutely. And I think if the American people choose not to follow a page from the media and turn the page on this, and they stick to it and say, we want accountability, it may just happen. But you're right. It is brave Americans who stepped up in spite of the government that are giving us hope that all is not lost. Katie, it's always great talking to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Coming up, new documents show Dr. Fauci was lying to Congress when he said this.
You are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individuals. I totally resent that. And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
Steve Hilton is next.
Gain-of-function research was going on in that lab, and NIH funded it.
That is
you can't
not
get away from it. It meets your definition, and you are obfuscating the truth.
You're not obfuscating the truth. You are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individuals. I totally resent that. And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
Remember this? Dr. Fauci and Senator Rand Paul getting heated on the Senate floor back in July over the origins of COVID-19. Now, since the beginning of the investigation, Dr. Fauci has denied that the U.S.-funded gain-of-function research happened in the Wuhan lab or that it happened at all. But a new report by The Intercept is confirming what we all knew all along. They uncovered hundreds of documents from the National Institute of Health revealing that EcoHealth Alliance used federal grant money for bat corona research. So that means that Rand Paul was right and Dr. Fauci has been lying to the world. Richard Ebright, a molecular biologist at Rutgers University, tweeting, quote, "The documents make it clear that assertions by the NIH director, Francis Collins, and the NIAID director, Anthony Fauci, that the NIH did not support gain-of-function research or potential pandemic pathogen enhancement at the Wuhan Institute of Virology are untruthful. Joining me now to react, host of The Next Revolution, Steve Hilton. Steve, it's always a pleasure to have you on. You've been following this story probably more closely than anybody else. I know you're not surprised by this, but we've been talking about accountability all evening here on Primetime. And I'm just wondering, how does he still have a job? And do you think he'll get hauled before Congress to be held accountable for this?
Well, you're exactly right, Rachel. I mean, how is it possible that we have someone there who is now clearly revealed to have lied to Congress? The substance of what is in these documents, as you just noted, isn't particularly different from what we first reported on The Next Revolution on a Sunday back in January, and in subsequent reports. So the substance isn't particularly new, but the detail is new. It's further evidence that he lied to Congress. He's lied every time he's been asked about it. And you think, well, how is it possible that this guy who lies and lies and lies again is still in his job? And a further point, when he says with that kind of indignation, are you saying that I was responsible for the deaths of all these people? Yes, we are saying that.
Yeah.
We are saying that the most likely origin of the pandemic is this research that Fauci and Collins funded. And remember, they went around the rules to fund it, rules that were put in place by first the Obama administration and then the Trump administration. They went around those rules to fund this reckless, dangerous research. Now, you ask about accountability. We had the Biden regime just the other week. They published this report from the intelligence agencies, which basically gave us no kind of answer at all. They said, look, we don't really know where it came from. We know that the Chinese covered up their part in the release of it. That's fair enough. We don't know any more there. But remember, the HHS Inspector General announced in June that they were launching an investigation into exactly this grant-making process in the National Institutes of Health and the institute run by Fauci, NIAID. That is ongoing. That is supposed to be published sometime next year. So we have to hope that at least the Inspector General will at least reveal the truth of this, which is first that Fauci lied about the gain-of-function research that he funded, and secondly, and this is where I think we might finally get some accountability, he broke the rules that were in place under two administrations to push forward this dangerous research.
Yeah, and Steve, he really used his position and the credibility that he had from his work, you know, in AIDS research, and as well as the media that loved him. He used all that to throw the entire world off the scent of the Chinese and that lab and his funding. Here's a letter that was written by Steve Daszak. These are documents. So these documents show how Fauci and Peter Daszak, head of EcoHealth Alliance, were doing gain of function. It makes even more sense when you remember this email. It was sent to Fauci at the beginning of the pandemic. It was praising him for throwing the media off the scent of the lab. It says, thank you on behalf of our staff and collaborators for publicly standing up and stating that the scientific evidence supports a natural origin for COVID-19. I mean, there he is working with the person that he was laundering our money through to do gain of function research. And there he is, that guy's thanking him for that.
Exactly, for the cover-up.
Yes.
And these two were zealots in favor of this kind of research. That's what we got to remember. So people ask, well, how could Dr. Fauci, his whole life dedicated to fighting disease, how can you possibly say that he would do something as dangerous as this? Because he was a fanatic in favor of this research. Remember that 10 years ago, 2011, he wrote with Francis Collins an opinion piece in the Washington Post where he said, quote, that creating a dangerous virus in the laboratory is a risk worth taking.
Yeah.
Because it would help us understand how to fight these pandemics. He said it was a risk worth taking. Does he still think that today?
Yeah, it's ghoulish. Steve, you have been at the forefront of this, as I said. Thank you for staying on it. Thank you for making, coming forward when it was, before any of this came out. We really appreciate it, and I know you're going to continue to stay on it. Thank you, Steve.
Absolutely. Thank you,
All
Rachel.
right. Now, the left is... Joe Biden's war on the unborn continues. His DOJ is now promising to defend women who are pursuing illegal illegal abortions in Texas. Quote, "We will continue to protect those seeking to obtain or provide reproductive health services pursuant to our criminal and civil enforcement of the FACE Act." This is in direct response to Texas banning abortions after a fetal heartbeat is detected. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem has been fighting for the unborn in her state as well. She's unveiling a big announcement on the matter today. Governor, tell us about it.
Hi, Rachel. How are you doing this evening?
How are you? Tell us about this big announcement.
Well, today I signed an executive order that would ban telemedicine abortions. Essentially, what this would do would be requiring in the state of South Dakota that an abortion would only legally be allowed in the situations defined by our statute, but also after an in-person examination by a doctor licensed in South Dakota. And obviously, everybody knows that I'm pro-life and do not support any kind of abortions, but here what the Biden administration is doing is trying to put forward abortion on demand, and we're going to stop them and make sure that that's not available in our state.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I don't think a lot of people in America even knew that you could obtain an abortion via telemedicine, so that's actually very interesting to me. Another thing our audience probably doesn't know much about is that when you were elected to be governor, you decided that you needed someone in your administration to represent the unborn because they don't have a voice. Tell us about this person and what do they do?
Yeah, I have a person in my office whose job description is designated as being a pro-life advocate, as being an unborn child advocate that every day looks for opportunities to defend life. So it may be in putting statute, putting laws on the books. It may be, jumping onto court cases and challenges. It may be through the regulations that come through agencies and pushing back on the Biden administration and what they're trying to do. It's so interesting to me, Rachel, to listen to these, the left and the extremists, how they've been demanding for years and years that abortions need to be between a woman and her doctor. And now essentially what they're doing is saying that abortions need to be available between a woman and any stranger on the internet, somebody we don't even know if they have a license. And it's incredible to me what they're saying and what they're doing, and South Dakota is going to fight to protect each and every single life.
Yeah, well, Joe Biden has now put his DOJ to go after pro-lifers in light of the heartbeat bill in Texas. Do you plan, or your advocate for the unborn in your administration, are you guys planning on doing something similar in South Dakota?
We've already connected with those in Texas that brought forward this bill and are working and looking at how we could facilitate this legislation in South Dakota and what would be an appropriate fit for our statute as well. But I think that was incredible to watch and to see happen out of the Supreme Court, and certainly it was immediately something that we were looking at doing here in our state.
Well, Governor, you are a champion for life, and you have given a voice to the elderly, the vulnerable, the unborn, the disabled, and as a mother of a special needs baby, that means a lot to me in particular. So thank you for all you do for life.
Well, you are too, Rachel. I appreciate you sharing your testimony with everybody about how important little Valentina is with each and every single one of your children.
Thank you. Every life matters. Thank you, Governor.
Yep.
All right, well,
night.
Good night. What kind of person would betray their own faith to score political points? Because that's exactly what our president is doing. Welcome back. The murder mystery of a prominent South Carolina legal family just got a lot more complicated. Chief Breaking News correspondent Trace Gallagher has the story.
Hey, Rachel, the Murdaugh family has been referred to as South Carolina royalty, which is why the story has both riveted and baffled the entire state. Let's begin with this weekend, when prominent South Carolina lawyer Alex Murdaugh called 911 and claimed to have been shot in the head while changing a tire on a back road. Murdaugh was rushed to a Savannah hospital, but the wound turned out to be superficial. So far, there are no suspects, but after being shot, Alex Murdaugh yesterday issued a surprising statement saying he was quitting the law firm his great-grandfather started 100 years ago, and he was entering rehab, though he did not say why. Turns out he didn't quit the law firm, he was forced out for allegedly stealing money. And all of this comes just 3 months after Alex Murdaugh found the bodies of his wife and son at the family hunting lodge. Both had been shot to death. Here's Murdaugh's 911 call at the time. Watch.
I've been up to it now. It's bad.
Okay. Okay, and are they breathing?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and you said it's your wife and your son?
My wife and my son.
Are they in a vehicle?
No, ma'am. They're on the ground out at my kennels.
So far, no arrest in the killing of Margaret and Paul Murdaugh, but when 22-year-old Paul Murdaugh was shot to death, he was standing trial for driving and crashing a boat while he was drunk. That crash killed a 19-year-old woman. And back in 2015, a Murdaugh family member was also investigated and cleared in the death of a 19-year-old man who was found with his skull crushed. So for now, it's unclear if these killings and attempted killings might be revenge, or if the strange events of this weekend might somehow make Alex Murdaugh a person of interest. Rachel.
Thank you, Trace. Joe Biden is only the second U.S. president, Catholic U.S. president, but his presidency has already sparked a deep divide among the White House and the Catholic Church. Biden's pro-choice stance on abortion has become a major concern among the Catholic community, triggering major Catholic figures to come out against the administration's agenda. San Francisco Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone is one of those critics, saying this in a recent op-ed, quote, "Abortion is therefore the most pressing human rights challenge of our time. Can we pastors speak softly when the blood of 60 million innocent American children cries out for justice? You cannot be a good Catholic and support expanding a government-approved right to kill innocent human beings. The answer to crisis pregnancy is not violence, but love for both mother and child." And according to reports, even Biden's own church has clashed with them, with some even questioning whether he should be denied communion over his betrayal of Catholic principles. Joining me now are Charlie Hurt and Bill McGurn, both are Fox News contributors. Welcome to you both. Bill, I'm going to start with you. It is interesting that, you know, in light of this heartbeat bill in Texas, the loudest voices have been two of the most prominent Catholics, in fact, I would say the most powerful Catholics in the United States of America, Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden. So as a Catholic, Bill, do you think that it's time for the church to have more people like the Archbishop of San Francisco, kind of speak out and clear up the moral confusion here?
Yeah, well, let's start from the beginning. Joe Biden ran on a promise to follow the science, but he sure doesn't follow the science when he looks at the unborn. You know, biology tells us this is an innocent human life in the womb. That the Catholic Church doesn't tell us that. That comes from biology. And Joe Biden, by supporting abortion, by supporting the taking of innocent human life, he's just objectively put himself outside the church teaching. We're not here to judge Joe Biden's soul or anything like that, but he represents himself as a good faith Catholic when his support for abortion, which has grown more extreme over the years. I mean, he used to be, for example, against federal funding, and now he's changed that. It just puts him in a very difficult place, and you know, he largely gets away with it because the media is not very pro-life and not likely to press him on his contradictions. Also, he can go to Mass. We all do this. No one, you know, we're all Catholic.
Of course.
And in a sense, we're all bad Catholics because we're all sinners. But the public advocacy for what the church calls an intrinsic evil is really in a different camp. And you can't overcome that by carrying rosary beads and pointing, you know, going to church and so forth. He's just objectively at odds with the church's teaching.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. He is on the wrong side of science here. We know so much about fetal development, and those 4D ultrasounds. I mean, I had an ultrasound 22 years ago, and I just had one 2 years ago, and the change is remarkable. Mothers today are meeting their babies before they're even born. Siblings are meeting their siblings before they're even born, and they look like little babies. And these images are remarkable, and it's really hard. And perhaps this is why we're seeing heartbeat bills coming forward, because I think Americans are becoming more, not less pro-life, because of the science. Now, Charlie, I know you're not Catholic, but your wife is Catholic. You have lots of Catholics in your family. You're what the woke would say, Catholic adjacent, maybe. So I'm going to ask you about the politics surrounding this. How fair is it that, Joe Biden, sort of as Bill mentioned, has these commercials, he's holding his rosary beads. At the same time, as vice president, he went up against the Little Sisters of the Poor. Here he's using his DOJ to go after pro-lifers. Is it fair for him to have it both ways politically?
Well, I think in a lot of ways that's kind of the most appalling part of all of this, isn't it? And we've seen it with both Joe Biden and we've seen it with Nancy Pelosi as well. Not only do they betray their beliefs or betray the beliefs of their church, the church that they claim to want to support, by being such enthusiastic supporters of abortion, but they also trot out their Catholic religion whenever it serves their purposes politically, and it often comes up, for example, when they try to defend their open border policies, and they try to say that it's unchristian somehow to have borders. Well, of course, the big difference there is, borders are truly in the realm of Caesar, not the realm of God. A nation's borders are up to Caesar to sort of enforce, whereas the issue of life is very much up to God, and that's an issue of God. Obviously, we've come together as a society and to determine that life is very valuable and we want to protect it, which is, I think, one of the reasons that this Texas heartbeat bill is so fascinating is because it does attach to something that is scientific, something that's biological, which is the heartbeat.
That's right. There is the heartbeat. Thank you, Charlie and Bill. Don't go away. Don't go anywhere, because Johnny Joey Jones is here, and he's going on the clock next. Just a few minutes left in the show, and time for Johnny Joey Jones on the clock. 4 stories, 60 seconds each. All right, let's go, Joey. So first up, shoplifters are becoming more and more brazen in Joe Biden's America. Check out these thugs in Oregon running out of a Lowe's with thousands of dollars worth of merchandise and shopping carts. Okay, Joey, do you think they are going to face any consequences for this?
No, if you read the articles about this, the police department basically said their jails are too full and they're not putting anybody in them. What they're stealing there is copper wire, and they actually are stealing this out of houses that are being built. This is a huge problem all over the country, and they're going to take it and sell it as scrap metal. It's ridiculous, and if you come on a job site in Georgia, you're probably going to get shot doing that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these stores, I mean, Lowe's is going to still be open, but this is happening in little drug stores across the country. Many of those stores are having to shut down because they just can't keep up with the shoplifting, or they're
Yeah,
go ahead.
If they can get away with it at Lowe's, they think they can get away with it at the mom and pop store, and that's where it becomes a bigger scourge on our community. It's ridiculous and it's disgusting.
Okay, up next, Rutgers University has banned an unvaccinated student from taking, listen to this, Joey, virtual classes. That's right. 22-year-old Logan Haller didn't comply with the school's vaccine mandate, so he's not even allowed to log on for online classes. I mean, what the heck?
Hey, listen, this is one of those deals where you might want to reevaluate where you want to spend your time and money. Maybe Rutgers University isn't the place for this young man. Listen, college is a place for varying ideas, and if he can put together his case for either not taking the vaccine or not needing to prove it, college is a place where that should be respected. He's not going to class. He's not endangering anyone else. This is the height of hypocrisy, and of course, a liberal institution is at the forefront of it.
The height of stupidity. I mean, he's not even in class.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense at all. Go ahead.
His dad said he's not a doctor, but he doesn't think coronavirus is transmitted through computer screens, which is a pretty smart idea, pretty smart way to look at it.
Yeah, I'm not a doctor either, and I agree with him. All right, up next, a TikToker by the name of, okay, listen to this, Better Reality About Men. That's her Twitter handle, or here's what she wants to do. She wants to ban the term princess. Listen to this.
If you have a daughter, you need to stop calling her princess if you do. The way that Disney has branded the princess is based on her beauty as her most important asset. Why don't we call girls scientist, engineer, doctor? Like, why does it have to be something cutesy like, oh, princess, what do you need? Like, no.
Why don't we call her scientist or doctor? Because she's like 4.
Yeah, well, there's a good reason there, ma'am. We can earn the title scientist or doctor or engineer or dentist. We can't really earn the title princess. I mean, there's a few places you can marry into it, but the whole idea here is it's a fantasy. It's make-believe. It's imagination. It's pretend. My daughter is a princess. She could also whoop your tail, and she knows to do both.
That's awesome. I wasn't called princess. I was called reina, which is queen, so even worse, right? Okay, and finally, Tom Selleck was trending on Twitter today. Why? Well, some on the left took great offense to Magnum P.I., the actor, saying that Jesus Christ is responsible for all of his success in life. So what do you say?
Listen, why do people care what a successful man credits for his own success? Some of the tweets were absolutely ridiculous, but I believe Tom Selleck because his mustache is something of a deity. Everybody understands that. It's to be worshipped. It's quite unique. I think only God could give a man a mustache that pretty. As a guy who wishes he could grow a beard without it looking like Joe Dirt, I'm very envious, and I'm sure Jesus played a hand in it.
Yeah, he's been a sex symbol for a long time, so he owes a lot to God for that. All right, Joey, thanks for joining me on The Clock.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you for watching Fox News Primetime. I'm Rachel Campos Duffy. Don't forget to catch my podcast with my husband, Sean, From the Kitchen Table. We have new episodes